This is the Fiction Nonfiction podcast from Literary Hub, where we believe that every issue in your Twitter feed or on the evening news has already been tackled somewhere in literature. I'm Whitney Terrell, the author of The Good Lieutenant.
And I'm Ganeshananthan, also known as Sugi, author of the novel Love Marriage. And as this podcast's resident Minnesotan, I am proud to say that this special episode of the Fiction Nonfiction podcast is presented in conjunction with the Loft Literary Center's literary festival, Wordplay, which this year, for obvious reasons, is going virtual.
What a great festival. We were lucky to be in, I think, like the first ever last year.
Yeah, it was awesome.
I am a huge fan of Minnesota, especially since this week, my governor in Missouri decided to cut millions of dollars from my state, for my university's budget and the budget of all the other universities in the state, so we can put together a pandemic response fund. Not that I think pandemic responses are bad, but the only reason we need a fund is that the president has totally blown the nation's pandemic response. And our governor's response so far seems to be like last in declaring stay-at-home orders, and that's about it. So I'm not sure why it needs to be so expensive.
Well, I can tell you a story or two about the president telling bananas MAGA hat protesters that Minnesota needs to be liberated from the exact same rules that the president himself drew up. And I personally only need to be liberated from these idiots. So what do you do?
There's nothing. It's so horrible. You're stuck at home. These ridiculous things are occurring. You can't do anything about it. What I did was I talked to the Finsters on Zoom.
Do I want to know who the Finsters are?
The Finsters are my friends. The name comes from an old Bugs Bunny cartoon. All of us are called Finster. There's my college roommates, Chris and Pierre, and also our friend Aria. We all lived on the same hall freshman year. They are the Finsters. They're the people you speak a secret language with. Do you have any Finsters in your life?
Oh, I do have Finsters, it turns out. I didn't know. I've got Finsters. But tell me about your Finsters.
I mean, they're the most important thing outside of my family. You know, we're all from totally different places. There's no reason why you would think that we would be friends. Pierre's part Haitian. He's a surgeon. He grew up in Baltimore. Chris is this volleyball player and early music singer from Muncie. There's a whole bunch of those. That's totally normal. Aria is a lawyer who grew up as the brainiac black girl in a very white upstate New York town. But I feel this like incredible, powerful, and almost inexpressible connection to them. And we've been friends now for, 35 years. That's what, and when I die, I know they're going to be there.
So in that case, you're going to be very excited, along with our audience, to talk to our guest for this episode, Danez Smith, whose most recent collection of poetry, Homie, is all about friendship, the names we give our friends, including the real name of this book, which is not Homie, and specifically friendship between Black people. As we mentioned earlier, Danez is joining us in conjunction with the Loft Literary Center's literary festival, Wordplay. Along with Homie, Danez is the author of the poetry collection, Don't Call Us Dead, which won the Forward Prize for Best Collection and was a finalist for the National Book Award, and the collection Insert Boy, which won the Kate Tufts Discovery Award and the Lambda Literary Award for Gay Poetry. They are the recipient of fellowships from the Poetry Foundation, the McKnight Foundation, the Montalvo Arts Center, Cave Canem, and the National Endowment for the Arts. Their work has been featured in BuzzFeed, the New York Times, PBS NewsHour, and Best American Poetry. Danez is a member of the Dark Noise Collective and co-hosts the VS podcast with Franny Choi. Danez, welcome to the show.
And now I'm welcome. Hello, how are y'all doing? Sorry, my partner just got home. Started making noise. I'm good. How are y'all doing? Thank y'all for having me.
That's our best ever podcast entrance, so it's a good start.
I couldn't help it. You've got a language sprout behind you. That's kind of awesome. I don't know.
Oh yeah, my Language Sprout is the company my partner works for, and makes videos for during the week in our bedroom, he's teaching Spanish and English to the kiddies. So.
Cool. Mm-hmm. Well, so Whit and I were just talking about how we've been keeping up with our friends during quarantine and wondering how you're keeping up with yours.
I think it's kind of been easy. I feel like the digital waves are like already such a part of friendship for me. And especially in keeping contact with folks, especially like I have a lot of friends that don't live, close enough that I can see them all the time anyway. So, in some ways, friendship kind of feels uninterrupted in a couple of ways. And I'm still like, dropping stuff off when people need it, and maybe getting to see them in brief moments in that way. But FaceTime is real. Group chats are thriving. Text messages are free. So are phone calls on weekends. So I've been kind of keeping in contact with the homies just fine, I think, yeah.
There's a line I really liked, among many lines I liked from your poem, How Many of Us Have Them? You write, Andrew used to say, friendship is so friendship, ain't it? And that line sort of gets to this unspeakable part of what friendship is, at least for me in a lot of ways, you know, what it means and how it's defined. And because in real life, it like isn't defined. I mean, part of the thing about friendship is that it's like you know it when you have it, but you don't often say what it is, you know? And so what made you decide to write poetry about this sort of unspeakable thing? And how would you define it?
I don't think it's really a deciding factor, you know. For me, poems and books sort of happen just through letting the mind and the work wander. And I guess at some point it becomes intentional, but I guess a lot of these poems, I didn't necessarily know I was like trying to write about friendship. You know, you just like write a poem because it's what's on your heart, it's what's on your mind, it's what brings you joy or play for that day, or peace for that day. And by the time I looked up, I just had a bunch of work that was about friendship. And I didn't really know that I had been writing a book about it until I went looking to see if I had wrote a book about anything. And so, yeah, and I think it makes sense that I was attracted to it. My friends have just been a really big part of my life, especially in my 20s. And as I, you know, moved farther away from my family, and I really didn't find myself in that many long romantic relationships. I'm serially single, or at least I was for a long time. So friends were a big part of how love happened in my life. And I think love is one of those natural things that we write about when we turn to poetry. And so, you know, love, what it means to be a human, death, and what it means to be amongst other humans. And so, all those things, I guess, some of when I think about them, my friends' names come to mind, whether in joy or in sorrow. And so I guess it kind of felt natural, or not like a choice, but it felt like if I was to evidence my life in this work, if I'm going to like confess about something, then I guess friends might as well be it, because they're there. Yeah.
I was trying to think of, you know, I mean, there are obviously tons of poems about love, and friendship is about love, but I was trying to think of poets that I thought, I can think of a lot of fiction writers, probably because I'm a fiction writer, who write about friendship. But I was trying to think, I mean, there's Whitman is obviously great on friendship. Who are other like great poets on friendship in your opinion? Or Sugi, if you have poets on friendship that you really like.
Oh, I love Ross Gay, and how he just like sees people, and maybe it's not always friends. I think like it's like intimacy, right? Or even, you know, you expand that word of what a friend is. I think about his poem, Feet, or his poem Spoon from Catalog of Unabashed Gratitude. I really love one of my friends, Human Win, and how he writes about friendship. I think he's really genius at it. June Jordan is somebody who I've been reading a lot of hers in the quarantine. And she's always writing poems for other people that she loved, people that raised her, people that studied her. She has a poem for Fannie Lou Hamer that I love so much, and I've been returning to it for the last couple of weeks.
And there are names in your work, and one of my favorite poems among yours is the first one in Homie, which, you know, just revisiting it now as the pandemic continues and our president reveals himself as like not only a national failure, but just a massive global one. I felt like reading that poem felt like some sort of counterspell to him. And I was wondering if you would read that poem for us.
Yeah, for sure. All right. My president. Today, I elect Jonathan, 11 and already making roads out of water. Young genius, blog writer, little community activist, curls tight as pinky swears, black as my nation. I trust the world in his tender, blooming hands. I trust him to tell us which rivers are safe to drink and which hold fish like a promise. And I elect Eve Ewing, who I know would misfrizzle the country into one big classroom where grandmas finger paint the national budget and uncles stand around smoking blacks, plotting on stars for our escape. She could walk to the podium at her inauguration and say, the future is now. And we would all marvel at the sun and moon looping the sky like a GIF as the cars all learned to fly and our skin grew bulletproof. And Colin Kaepernick is my president, who kneels on the air, bent toward a branch, throwing apples down to the children and vets. And Rihanna is my president, walking out of global summits with a wine glass in hand, our taxes returned in gold to dust our faces into coins. And my mama is my president. Her grace stunts on amazing, brown hands breaking brown bread over mouths of the hungry until there are none unfed. And my grandma is my president, and her cabinet is her cabinet, because she knows to trust what the pan knows, how the skillet wins the war. And the man I saw high kicking his way down the river, he is my president. And the trans girl making songs in her closet, spinning the dark into a booming dress, she too is my president. And Shonda Rhimes is my president, and Nate Marshall is my president, and Trina is my president, and the boys outside Walgreens selling candy for a possibly fictional basketball team, they are my presidents. And the bus driver who stops after you yell, wait, only twice is my prez. And dude at the pizza spot who will give you a free slice if you are down to wait for him to finish the day's fourth prayer is my president. And my auntie, only a few months clean, but clean, she is my president. And my neighbor who holds the door open when my arms are full of laundry is my president. And every head nod is my president. And every child singing summer with a red sweet tongue is my president. And the birds and the cooks and the single moms especially, and the weed dealers and the teachers and the meter maids who let you slide, and the cab driver who stops, and the nurse's swollen feet, and the braider's exhausted hands, and the bartender and Beyonce and all her kids, and the rabbi and the sad girls, and the leather daddy who always stops to say good morning, and the boy crying on the train, and the sudden abuela who rubs his back, and the uncle who offers him water, and the drag queen who begins to hum, oh, my presidents, my presidents, my presidents, my presidents, show me to our nation. My only border is my body. I sing your names, your names, my mighty anthem.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Colin Kaepernick was the subject of our very first episode, so
oh really?
We'll vote him
yeah.
president too for the show.
Dope.
I think I bought some of those, some of that candy for those fictional basketball teams.
You know, sometimes you break down and you buy the candy. You know,
I always buy the candy.
I don't. You got to barter with them kids. I'm like, I know why you out here, and there's no reason this Kit Kat needs to be $4. So let's talk.
This coronavirus thing is a lonely disease, as many people point out. You end up, if you're dying from it, you have to be alone. The measures to get rid of it involve us not being physically together. I wondered if you could talk about how it's affecting the friendships and communities that you write about in Homie.
I don't know. I lost a cousin to COVID. I have other family members who are sick. And I mean, you know, it's harder. It does. I think COVID forces us to not act how we know how to act, which is to reach out, to touch, to commune, to do all those things, right? And so it feels very, the medicine for it, or I guess the measures for it, feels very anti-human, or just the opposite of who we are. So like the opposite of poetry, I think, you know, it's just like poetry is about
speaking,
like
and that's the thing you're not supposed to do. You can't, you know, like wearing a mask is not what you do with poetry.
Yeah, exactly. And exactly, it's about connection, and that's exactly what is dangerous right now. I mean, I don't know if I you know, I don't think I have to like replicate anything you said. You know, it hurts Black people more because I mean, it hurts poor people more, right? We're talking, you know, I think about the people working at grocery stores, people, gig workers working for Instacart delivery folks, who are going through it. When we are in the hospital, right, Black folks are just believed less in the medical system. Our pain is not real, particularly when a Black woman says she's in pain in a hospital. Does anybody hear it? So yeah, I mean, like anything in America, if it hits us, I mean, it'll probably hit Black people hard. So I guess I don't know. I'm very unsurprised at the numbers, and I don't know. It's the same script, new drama. So
I have always been someone who reads the news at very high volume, which is not maybe a gift in this environment, but more like a curse. And just thinking about the sort of solidarity that was useful, I was thinking about your poem, What Was Said at the Bus Stop, which has this great scene in it, this great conversation that I love so much. And it suggests also really complex things about solidarity and the usefulness and also inadequacy of comparison as a connection between communities of color. And I just was thinking about, I mean, not just the pandemic, but all sorts of things where people compare, oh, I understand because of X and Y. And it really isn't the same, even though it might provide a little bit of a bridge, but the bridge doesn't quite touch somehow. And I wondered if you would read that poem for us.
Yeah, we'll happily do. All right, where's that one at? Cool. All right, what was said on the bus stop? Lately has been a long time, says the girl from Pakistan, Lahore to be specific, at the bus stop when the white man asks her where she's from and then says, oh, you from Lahore? Pretty bad over there lately. Lately has been a long time, she says, and we look at each other and the look says, yes, I too wish dude would stop asking us about where we're from, but on the other side of our side eyes, there was maybe a hand where hands do no good, a look that says, yes, I know lately has been a long time for your people too, and I'm sorry. The world is so good at making us feel like we have to fight for space to fight for our lives. Solidarity is a word. A lot of people say it. I'm not sure what it means in the flesh. I know I love and have cried for my friends. Their brown's a different brown from mine. I've danced their dances when taught and tasted how their mother's miracle the rice, different from mine. I know sometimes I can't see beyond my own pain, past black and white, how bullets love any flesh. I know it's foolish to compare. What advice do the drowned have for the burned? What gossip is there between the hanged and the buried? And I want to reach across a great distance that is sometimes an ocean and sometimes centimeters and say, look, your people, my people, all that has happened to us, and still make love under rusted moons, still pull children from mothers and name them, still teach them to dance. And your pain is not mine and is no less and is mine. And I pray to my God, your God blesses you with mercy. And I have tasted your food and understand how it is a good home. And I don't know your language, but I understand your songs. And I cried when they came for your uncles, and when you buried your niece, I wanted the world to burn in the child's brief memory. And still stood, and I have stood by you in the soft shawl of mourning, waiting and breathing and waiting.
Thank you. I love that
poem
so
is
much.
about waiting on the megabus really early in the morning.
What stop?
The Ann Arbor stop, trying to get the hell out of there. And go someplace for a show probably, and was far too early for some white man to be asking us questions. And when I woke up on the other side of a nap, I wrote this poem.
That conversation, I feel like I can see that scene so clearly, and perhaps have been in that scene. I'm not really sure, probably. And there's that line about comparison being foolish, and then all of those great comparisons reaching and failing in that penultimate stanza. What role does comparison play in your thinking about art and politics?
I mean, I think it's like how we learn to do things, right? It's how we like teach. It's like fundamental to everything. I think like how we teach is by comparison. Which one of these things is bigger? It's how you understand the concept of bigger and stuff like that. And it's how we write poems too. We wouldn't have the metaphor if it wasn't for the basic function of comparison, to hold two things by each other and say, how are these different? And let me show you how similar they are. If you didn't think, that's like half of the trick of being a writer, especially being a poet, I think, is to sort of, take something complex and show how it's been the same as us or been the same as the birds all along. So I think, comparison is, I think, sort of unavoidable when it comes to art. I think it's all about juxtaposition and relation and, obscuring and clarifying our relationships between things and ourselves and others. In politics, I guess I try not to get too far into comparison when it comes there, right? At least in terms of like, if the end result of that comparison is going to be about worth in some type of way. Right? Like you don't compare, like comparing struggles, right? Like often folks will like say not to conflate what goes on with, let's say, like the Black or the gay community, right? And I think I tried not to get into too much comparison there. Well, I think it can be a useful tool to just get people to understand that, like, hey, we all go through stuff. Oppression is bad, no matter who it happens to. You know, just to get us in a sense of oneness. But I don't know. I think sometimes it can be like very dangerous to play the comparison or the judging or the weight game when it comes to politics and struggles and stuff like that. I don't know, it's useful for voting, you know, comparing two candidates. Just
Well, but in that poem, as you're talking about on the artistic side, so Sugi, I was surprised when you said you felt like that the bridge wasn't made between the speaker and the woman on the bus, because I feel like that is built in, like it does happen in the poem. Like, I don't know. I mean, we have the poet here. Maybe the poet can tell us what they thought about it.
I don't know. I don't know if the bridge, I think that's kind of, maybe that's nice. I think that's a nice attempt, but I don't think the poem is about that actual connection, because really the only moments we connect is like looking at each other. And then I just do my poet thing and just talk too much in my own head. And so I don't know if I think the poem just uses that one moment of a sort of maybe unclear connection of like, you know, maybe we are sort of in a sense of oneness right now, or maybe we're just looking at each other. And it just takes that moment to expound upon my own selfish thinking, as most poems do, right? I feel bad for this lady sometimes. I feel bad for anybody I've ever put in a poem. Nobody has to be in a poet's sight. That's awful. Because all I do is like take my one side of the experience and try to spin it for my own selfish thinking.
I mean, that reminds me think of how many poems though have been created just like that by a chance encounter on a bus. I mean, you were mentioning Frank O'Hara, like going out to lunch, you know, or whatever, you know, and now everyone's in their house. Like, you know, I can't wait for everyone to get out so the poets can get back to work of observing people and then writing poems about them.
Exactly. I mean, I think people should just start lining up outside of our windows and just let us write about that for a little bit every day.
Poet viewing.
Yeah, just let us look at you, see what we can get, go on about your business, you know.
I would volunteer for that. I think it would be so exciting to be in a poem. I don't know. I guess like,
dude, people are so bored. They would totally come over to the poet's house.
See, that's why like poems can be so intimate and like a huge gift if you can actually like give somebody a poem, right? And like, I love writing about people that I can actually tell I wrote about them. But there's like, you know, there's this woman in this poem. There's like the poem Rose earlier in the book. Like all that is kind of selfish, you know? And I guess like sometimes being a poet feels like a thing of community, and sometimes it feels like the most like egotistical, selfish thing in the world that I just get to run back to my notebook with everybody else's stories and what I've made up about them in my head. And I get to look like a great person because I got to, you know, I got to be, you know, I got to write the poem about solidarity and like say all these wonderful things, but like she got shit out the deal. We just both left annoyed by this old guy.
You're such a fantastic reader and known for that also. And I'm wondering, I remember, I think the last time I was reading June Jordan, June Jordan was reading her work. And so I could hear the recording, and that was such a different experience. Do you find yourself turning to audio at all, or other forms of listening or reading?
No, I don't really like the audiobooks too much, to tell the truth. Don't tell my audiobooks that. But yeah, but I do watch a lot. Like I watch movies. I love every form of TV, whether it be the trashiest of the trash or the best piece of television ever. So I really got into Schitt's. I finished Schitt's Creek. I start and finish Schitt's Creek. And I am finishing up Steven's Universe.
I love Steven Universe so much.
So good. I want to go back and I think rewatch either like one of the HBO shows that I grew up loving. So like either Sex and the City, Oz, or 6 Feet Under. And I need to catch up on Westworld. So that's like my visual delight these days. Is coming through the Netflix and the Hulus and stuff like that. So yeah.
Perfect. Danez, we're so glad you could join us.
Yeah. Thank y'all so much. Thank y'all for having me.
Thanks, Danez. And we will remind our listeners to pick up a copy of Homie, published by the great Twin Cities Press, Grey Wolf. And thanks again to the Loft Literary Center's terrific book festival, Wordplay, for making this interview possible. Don't forget to check out the rest of their programming.